attached it to the agenda.
I did see that, yeah.
And turn on my light. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, on call to order this meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is streamed on the city's website and will be posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the room. The public will be recognized to ask questions, make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I won't recognize an individual a second time until everyone else has had a chance to speak. Anyone who does want to speak address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify yourself by name and address prior to speaking. Our minute takers participating remotely, committee members, turn on your microphones. And if the minute taker cannot hear, they'll ask you to speak louder or turn on your microphone. I now call to order this meeting, and I note that we do have a quorum present. We have 4 out of 5. So after speaking with the committee and out of kindness to the Peace Poll group, I'm going to reshuffle the agenda to move you up so you don't have to listen to everything else if you don't want to. So therefore, we are going straight to item 6. Where are we? Item 6. Continued discussion regarding the Peace Poll on Central Square. So, Mr. Bohannon, Deputy City Manager, you can lead off, please.
Sure can. Andy Bohannon, Deputy City Manager. So before you tonight, we're going to pull up some slides. One of the things that this committee asked us to do the last time we were in front of you 2 months ago was to put together a couple of different options, and we wanted to show you those. However, the group has we've met a few times since then and brought the idea in and narrowed that down. So we feel like we have a particular option for you tonight. So yeah, if we could pull up the slides for the TVs for the Peace Fountain. Yeah.
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
He didn't say anything. Thank you. Andy, are you turned on?
I'm on, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I get the green light. Do you want me to sit up there?
I'm gonna see.
All right, just 1 second. There we go. I can move. It needs to be driven from there. Yep. Okay. All right, this is a better view. We're gonna. So one of the couple of different options that we're going to show you tonight. I'm going to go just kind of briefly through all of them, and then I'm going to go back to the one that we kind of decided upon and brought forward and said, this is the one that we want to explore further and refine, and go out and get the donation and come back to you on. So we had talked about just having specifically a peace pole in the middle as the fountain. So that was option one that was created. Option two is the existing fountain with, it's very hard to see, but you can see some writing on some of the granite there in silver, and that is having messages of peace, and that would be all around the fountain. This is the existing fountain with a peace pole. This is the existing fountain with a peace pole on top. This is a version of the proposed new fountain with the peace pole in the back and it's with the standalone pole. And this is just the standalone pole if everything gets scrapped and we say, no, we're gonna go forward with the new design and, but we still want a peace pole. This is some options, and what we did here was took the granite that was in the existing fountain and kind of created an area around the pole itself. So the group kind of worked our way through this. There was a couple different iterations of everything, and we kind of circled back to this. Now, this image that you see in front of you was of April 21st. There was an April 9th version of this as well. It was just a little bit proportionally out of sync. So they came back and they refined this. And the April 9th, the concept of that had some black lettering on the fountain. So it was a little bit more distinctual. And that was kind of where the committee, and I certainly would invite Carl and the others up tonight if they would like to share. But so that was where we kind of led to our discussion. And it really kind of takes the ability of the existing fountain, the existing granite that is in the fountain now would be removed. It would be replaced with new granite with the piece on it, and then the fountain would actually be low level. It would not come from the top and come down. What has happened now is rust has kind of changed the color of the granite. So if you were to go back when that was originally installed, it would have been more of that traditional granite steel gray color that you would see in granite, as opposed to more of the red that you see out there today. And there's a lot of concrete in the existing fountain because it's had to been patched over time. And the whole purpose of this initial conversation was we have to replace the infrastructure within the fountain itself. And that was kind of the impetus of all of this. And so, you know, the group is saying we would be willing to donate the rock formation, the granite formation with peace embodied on it, and the city would be responsible for the infrastructure that it would typically place normally. So that is where the group kind of landed, and I think I'm leaving this photo up only for the purposes of this is the close likeness of where they landed, and I think we're in a decent spot for them to, you know, share their thoughts if you would like that, Mr. Chairman. The other piece is they've also been working with a local artist, and that artist has done some renderings as well. We were not prepared tonight to kind of like, because they were not finalized, and there are still some conceptual things that needed to happen. We wanted to find out tonight if you liked this concept with the granite posts in the middle and with peace around them, and we would move forward. We would say, accept this as informational and then come back in a few more months with a final design and a cost and say, this is what we're gonna be able to donate. They will be able to donate back to the city. So it gives you a little bit of everything that you would ask for. So if you need me to show anything else, I'm happy to do that.
So what we're looking at on that's option 2,
Yes.
where's the pole?
So the pole, there is no pole.
No pole.
It gets the theme of peace is incorporated into the granite. So it's this version, let me see if I can maybe zoom. In a little bit, and this one depicts it a little bit better. So you can see right here, may peace prevail
Okay.
is written here. It's difficult to see because it's in gray. If it was in black, it would be a little bit more pronounced, but that's what you would see around, on the granite around the fountain.
Was it explored, the idea of the sitting area being emblazoned with peace or something of
Yes,
that sort?
so this, what you see on the screen today is almost the exact replica of what we have there. The dimensions are very close, if not extremely accurate. Don Lucier, our Public Works Director, has been working with Stantec on this side and has measured everything, and this is what it came out to be. So this is 6-sided. On 3 sides, on 3 of the sides, you have dedications to Einbeck. So there are 3 sides that would be available to write some message of peace as well.
Okay. I'm absorbing everything, so anything I say just.
No, that's okay.
It's totally undecided, just to make that very clear. I was thinking that we were going in the direction of an old fountain and getting rid of the rocks. So this is a bit of a surprise.
So that was what Stantec had proposed back in February, if you recall, which is, let me just scoot back to,
That would be option 3, more or less.
yes. So, so if the committee wants to pursue option 3, I think the Peace Poll folks are gonna come back and say, that's great, we're not interested in that style of fountain, but we would like to still install a peace pole, which is a standalone peace pole as depicted here in that upper quadrant of the central square.
Okay, all right. Committee questions at this point?
I'll wait.
Okay, so members of the public, if you, I'll try to talk louder, I'm sorry. Carl or someone from the committee want to speak?
Oh, Carl Jacobs, 81 Wyman Road, Keene. I think Andy summarized the situation. Basically, we're here, we came in over a year ago with the idea of donating a freestanding peace pole to be on Central Square. And at an MSFI meeting, the subject of, well, could it possibly be incorporated into the fountain came up. And that was something that we certainly, if we can work together with the city on that, we're interested in that. We looked at the ideas that Stantec proposed, which Andy mentioned, and I think the idea of having a clear statement of peace is something that we want, be it on the fountain or be it in a freestanding. In other words, we had some ideas that were like works of art that were beautiful and peaceful, but peace poles really are pretty literate in terms of saying peace and may peace prevail, and we'd like to align ourselves with that sort of worldwide effort and symbolism. So I think that's part of why we liked, and I have the April 9th rendering. For some reason, the rendering that Stantec did April 9th changed a little bit to the one that is being shown here. I think what our notion, what we understood was that the existing stones could be repurposed and into maybe a less massive, but cleaned up. Maybe Andy can find the April 9th. Oh, you have, okay. Because the image up on the screen just pretty much shows the existing fountain. And so we would repurpose the existing stones to the extent that we could. As Andy mentioned, out there right now, everything is orange from the water. And so the idea has come up, not only by us, but I think from others, that the water would emerge at a lower level and not splash down the part of the monument that had the peace message on it, but would create a serene pool around it. And some of the rocks that, I don't know if rocks is the right word, but anyway, that are surrounding the fountain now could probably be rearranged and make a nice surrounding for the peace monument. There's a lot of different symbolism that people have talked about in that, peace rising from rubble and sorts of things, but a lot of that is really in the mind's eye. So I don't know what else, if you have any questions for me.
No question. Anybody?
I guess I just, what we're hoping tonight, because we've been here a few times, is can we go forward with, we don't have a finalized design, but if this idea of the existing stones being repurposed and to create a message of peace, and that the fountain perhaps be redesigned a bit so that the water isn't splashing over the part that has the peace message, then we can go forward and come in with some drawings that are probably easier to understand and are more representative of what would actually be there. But we don't want to, we want to know that we're on the same page with you.
Okay. With the standalone pole, how tall is it?
How tall it was going to be, I think, about 7 or 8 feet.
That's pretty tall.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Jay.
General comment?
Yeah, yeah.
My comment's going to be the same as the last time you were here. And my personal opinion is, I think you should go with a standalone peace pole. As we saw the last time, anytime we mention the fountain, the city goes nuts. Even if it's just where we're going to put it, in the middle to the side. And if your peace pole is incorporated with a fountain, I don't know how long it's going to take to move forward. And I'm looking at the standalone design, I think it looks great, and you wouldn't have to be in competition with whatever the heck's gonna happen with the fountain, because we don't even know. And it's hard to move forward. We don't know if we're gonna be repurposing the fountain as it is, if a new fountain's going in, if it's gonna be, what it's gonna be. And it's just my personal opinion. I think the peace pole's a great idea. I just think you ought to go with the path of least resistance and, come to us and say you like it there, because if you incorporate it with a fountain, this committee and the council, we don't know where we're going with the fountain yet. And we got 23,000 opinions out there right now. So that's just my opinion. I think you'd be much better off having it standalone. I think the design looks great. But that's just my opinion. I just feel if you go with a fountain, it's just gonna be, just a long time down the road. That's just my opinion. But I think it's a great idea.
So we started with a standalone.
I know.
And it was
I
the
know.
city who
Yeah.
sent us down this path.
Yeah.
So
Don't listen to us sometimes.
we're happy,
Yes, Counselor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question related to the fountain design that was the April 9th design, so the kind of like cleaned up blocks. I guess my question is around and I think this is maybe a question for Andy as well. what part of this would be funded, if any, by the city in terms of infrastructure? What part of this would be funded by the petitioners?
So the petitioners would be funding the granite piece that would sit inside the fountain. So the base that you see in front of you would remain, and then the infrastructure for the water, however that may get brought forward up as part of the fountain piece, would be the city's responsibility. And then the granite design that is placed in there would be the responsibility of this group.
Okay. So, and that's true of both the option that we have on this slideshow and the change to the physical footprint of the blocks.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so the group in option 2, we just, if you look at it, what you have in front of you, the proportion of the fountain was really small. And so when we said, hey, can you proportionally make that correct? They did, and they made it proportionally correct to the existing fountain. And it was my bad that I didn't say, keep the rock formation in the April 9th design. But you can very much see the similarities. And I know some people are not visually, you gotta see it to say, yeah, that's it. But this is, the black lettering is there. That's what we would be on the screen here in front of you would be the black lettering or some formation of that. And it wouldn't necessarily be the exact same design. There would be a new formation of granite that gets brought forward. As Mr. Jacobs said, there'd be some smaller pieces in the bottom that would, work related to the water. So, did that answer your question,
It
Counselor?
does. Yeah. I mean, I was just looking for a little bit of clarification around what is infrastructure versus kind of what is the design. So that does clear it up for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Tobin, got anything? You don't have to.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at it, and so if I'm being honest, I never had a problem with the rock formations in the beginning, but, and maybe I'm less particular about my water features than some people, but I do like the idea of incorporating it into the fountain and coming up with, and I love the idea of, it sounded like you were talking about a local artist being brought into that, which I think it's always great to find opportunities to highlight local artists and to kind of showcase that, and it's something to be proud of when we have someone locally who has designed something. I think that I also have a better understanding of what a peace pole is traditionally now. I don't think I had a clear understanding of that when this conversation first started. I can also envision, I can also see, I think I have a better idea of the standalone, and I can imagine that more in the downtown space, having a place there. I have heard a few people mention concerns about the oranging of the stone. And I would also be curious about any maintenance required, even in terms of cleaning and visibility. So if there were something in the fountain, what type of maintenance would need to happen to make sure that those words are still visible, and that would just be a question that I would have, but I could support either of those options, I think.
Other members of the public like to weigh in, speak? Anyone? You don't have to, but you're here. Okay. I don't think we're going to make a hard decision, but we are moving, I think, in a direction. Now that I've seen what the peace pole looks like in the standalone, as Council Filio said, get it in, you get it done, and otherwise we could be messing around with this fountain and pole. My original hope, which is not going to happen, I get it, was that the fountain itself would be the statement for peace and dedicate the fountain to peace, and you don't need another thing in Central Square, another structure. I don't think that's going to satisfy the committee. I think you want more of a statement other than just a verbal acknowledgement. So for my contribution to the discussion, I'd like the standalone, and whether it's option 1, 2, 3, or 4, doesn't really matter a whole lot to me. I do want to weigh in that I want to see the fountain. I want the rocks to not be there. I've never liked them when they first went in the 70s or whenever, but it just doesn't really fit. I hope not. But there's going to be 15 of us that are going to be making this decision. So that's what I think anyway. So back to any one of you. This is discussion, there's no motion, so.
I'm just going to echo what Councilor Greenwald said and to echo what I said before. Keep it simple. And there's, well, 4 of us here tonight. Then you're going to get to 15 councils with 15 opinions on a fountain. And like, it's not my first rodeo. I've been down this road a few times with other things. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Thanks.
Okay. Councilor Jacobs.
So if I get the drift a little bit here, the simplest thing would be to vote to accept our initial proposal, which was to donate a peace fountain to
Peace
be
pole.
installed
Peace
on
pole.
Central Square.
Peace pole.
Which it's, I think you all still have it in front of you. We're more than prepared to do that. It's certainly been interesting to have all this discussion, but
Well, when you get involved with aesthetics.
if we, you know, I think, you know, a vote to move forward with the initial proposal that we put in, I think would make me happy, just as happy as any of these fountain things. I'm not saying I dislike the fountain idea either, but if the preference is for the freestanding peace pole, we've already kind of got that ready to go.
Well, we got to settle into some things. Okay, and then,
Good. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what the motion is going to end up being. I think that I have a preference for incorporating it into the fountain in some way, and the reason for that is that I have tried to get to a place since this first came on our agenda of understanding more completely the connection that the Peace Pole has to Keene specifically, and thinking about some of the other features of Central Square, the Soldiers Monument, right, which is the monument to the soldiers who are from Keene and died in the Civil War. The kind of Einbeck partner city dedication of the fountain. Like there are some specific ties to Keene that I have tried to get to a place of seeing with this particular installation. I'm not outright opposed to a peace pole in Keene. I do wonder if we're going to go in the direction of a standalone pole if Central Square is the place for it. So I want to be transparent with my colleagues on the committee and with members of the public and petitioners about my thinking. I would like to see something advance out of committee at this point with at least some clear direction. But that's my hesitation with the standalone peace pole as its own structure in Central Square. I think we're at a place of needing to make some kind of decision, one way or the other, about fountain or peace pole, or nothing. But I don't think nothing is really an option for us. But
city manager, you have some thought? I don't know. Look like you're next.
No, I was just going to say, I do think it would be great to have some direction from the committee tonight that could move forward to council. I think that Andy and the group have done a great job at really trying to show what the options are and get as creative as they could. And I think we're at a pretty good place now to hopefully have something from the committee to move forward to council.
Okay. Anything else from the public? Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Joel Fosher. I'm the artist that's been working with these gentlemen here. First of all, I'd like to say I think you have an amazing opportunity right in the center of Keene here to incorporate this idea of a peace pole in perhaps a non-traditional way. So we have this idea of option A, having the peace pole by itself, or B, the conversation of the water feature being incorporated. I think within the 4 options shown, B or the later version of that kind of shows an option that's cleaned up for both. I think what I'm trying to say is there's an opportunity where we have a very standard idea of a peace pole that kind of blends in after a couple months. Or you have this opportunity to kind of blend these 2 ideas together, and it really does make a statement where you're cleaning up some of what the city has already said they don't like with the staining, so on and so forth, and to rectify some of the maybe issues with the iron staining in the future is why we were saying bring those water levels lower, et cetera. So I'm here to support the idea that there's discrepancies that could work for option A or B, and I would just hate to see the opportunity for something very unique to be kind of turned down and kind of blend in like is already going on. So that's my perspective on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee, what do you want to do? What do you think?
I'll make a motion for here and see what it says.
All right.
Okay. I'll move we recommend to the full council that we move forward with a standalone peace bowl in Central Square.
Second?
And there's a second. So at this point, the public still can speak if you have any further thoughts. And seeing none, committee, any
This is good.
further thoughts?
No.
So, yes, sir.
I will vote to advance this out of committee and to the full council, where the 15 of us can make the decision. I am still going to need to think about how I'm going to vote personally when it comes time to make the final decision.
Okay. Okay, so we have motion and seconded. Anything further? West?
Just real quick, I know that I can understand where Counselor Favelis is coming from. I also feel like, having lived here for a while, I have seen so many demonstrations of peace, and it makes sense to me. And I know that we designed a space in Central Square where we have little pockets, and I can imagine that working in a lot of different places there, so.
Okay, good.
Good.
Okay, ready to vote? We have motion, all in favor? Oh, unanimous, wow. We made a decision.
Plugging along.
Peace poll. Okay, thank you for your attendance this evening. Okay, good. So now we're going to jump back into the agenda. The first item on the agenda is a request to install a sculpture at Patricia Russell Park from Frederick McMillan. And I believe he's here. Oh, just in time. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
How are you?
No, turn your.
I'm Rick McMillan from Dublin, New Hampshire.
Georgia Casamatis, Gilsum, New Hampshire. You have to push that every time?
No,
No.
Now it's on. Okay.
green.
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome. Did you have time to review the proposal?
Yes.
That's great. What would you like us to start talking about?
to show and tell what you want to do, basically. It's not only for us, it's for the thousands that are watching on,
Oh,
at
yes.
home.
So we don't have a digital file, unless the submission that we have is available to us to show the picture. I
I
have it
have
on my
not seen-
phone.
It's in the packet. It's in the online packet.
Oh, yes, I did see that. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
Apologies to everyone out there, but it's in the packet online for the meeting minute agenda. Or we might get it.
I did see that.
No.
Maybe not.
But if we can get on the internet to the city website for MFSI, it's on.
Well,
it's
let me
online.
begin by saying that I got bitten by the sculpture bug about 3 or 4 years ago at a Rotary conference in Meredith. And they have a sculpture walk along their waterfront, which they have an annual sculpture display of probably a dozen pieces of art that they issue a call for all New England sculptors to submit ideas. And from that point, I pursued looking into sculpture. There's a sculpture park in Brookline, New Hampshire. A guy by the name of John Wilder is the Andrews Sculpture Park. It's open to the public. It's an abandoned ski area where they invite sculptors from all over the world to come in and create monumental outdoor sculptures, and they leave them on the ski trails. From that point, I pursued it a little further in Tucson, where I spend part of my winters, and happened upon the Tucson Sculpture Park. And I was just trying to figure out what is the business model for a sculpture park. So I went to this Tucson Sculpture Park and met the executive director, who happens to be from Greenfield, New Hampshire. She marched me across the tarmac and introduced me to a fellow who is loading up a monumental sculpture on a trailer with Texas plates by the name of Michael Manjares. He's from Corpus Christi. We got to talking, and he said, well, I've never been to New England, so I invited him up. And that summer, he came up on his own nickel, and he spent a week with us, touring the area from Peterborough to Dublin to Keene. He met with the selectmen, the mayor at the time, George Hensel, Luca Paris, who is the chair of the Keene Peterborough Chamber of Commerce, and got a flavor for what our era is. And it was clear that we don't have three-dimensional sculpture or three-dimensional art in our area. We've got two-dimensional. We've got performing arts, but we don't have three-dimensional art. And so he embarked on the idea of establishing a cornerstone project that would maybe involve a sculpture trail throughout the Monadnock region. Well, a few months later, Michael called me from Corpus, and he said, I've got a proposition. I've got a well-known national artist whose widow is willing to lend you one of his works on a renewable 2-year loan basis.
Maybe.
Well, I found a spot in Peterborough with the help of their select board, and we were anticipating a cornerstone project. The thought was that we had a high-end work of art, people would respond to that, and we would expect, who knows, lots of interest in three-dimensional art. Well, as time went on, the widow, Kim Vadia is her name, decided she wanted to sell this piece. We didn't have $80,000 to buy it, so the project just hit a dead end. We had raised money to transport this sculpture from Brooklyn, New York to Peterborough and install it, but we certainly didn't have enough money to buy it. So things were at a standstill for a couple of years until last fall. I attended a symposium at Apple Hill and got to know Georgia and other people in the area who were interested in sculpture. I met with the director of the Parks and Recreation Department in the city of Keene. I've given her number as someone to contact. And we talked about the possibility of establishing a cornerstone project in Keene, and she laid out the Patricia Russell Park as being a place that the city, or at least the Parks Department, would be willing to set aside for sculpture. Well, we had a place now for sculpture, but didn't have a work of art. A month or so later, I attended a morning chat coffee session with, under the auspices of Friends of Public Art and the Arts Alive group. And one of the attendees there gave me the name of a guy named Christopher Curtis. I didn't know him, but apparently he has a nationwide reputation in the works of sculpture. I contacted Christopher via email, and he called me up, believe it or not, and volunteered to help me or help us. And I was working with Georgia by then, the Friends of Public Art, to establish a platform for three-dimensional outdoor sculpture. A couple of weeks later, he invited me up to his studios in Stowe, and I went up there on a Friday afternoon, and he led me to go to the Trapp Family Lodge, where this particular piece of sculpture is in a field with half a dozen other of his works. We went to his studio, and an hour later he said, well, if you've got the money for installation, I'll bring it down and install it. Well, now it's lo and behold, we had both a sculpture and a place to put it. So that's the background for this proposal, that we accept Christopher Curtis's offer to lend us his work of art, and he's valued it at somewhere around $28,000 for a period of probably a year. We need to work out the details, and there are a lot of aspects to it that we don't know the answer to, but we're all ears to suggestions and whatnot. But that's the idea behind this, and we hopefully it'll catch fire, and others will come forward, and we can attract some other artists to exhibit their works of art in the city of Keene and the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you. Good history. I think city staff is going to have to review the whole situation of public art and how do we accept, what do we put it, and liabilities, responsibilities, and such. Immediate question, is there any cost to the city?
No.
Okay, that's an easy one.
No, the money for installation and any insurance policy, I presume would be
During
a,
installation. During installation
during installation.
and deinstallation.
We have funds in the Grand Monadnock Rotary Club, New Hampshire, Sculpture New Hampshire project to, I think, cover any of those costs.
Okay.
The sculptures that are located at the Keene Airport have followed the city Keene Public Art Ordinance, and that's what we've modeled in our proposal. So we tried to answer every question that was in that document so that there were no more questions, but there always are. But we're happy to continue the conversation after you've had more time to sit with it. But I've worked with Katie Schwerin on those other projects, and those seem to be pretty smooth in the way that they were installed. And they're permanent. This would be rotating, so it's a little bit different in the way that we approach this and how the logistics work. But yeah, I think we need sculpture. I think it's a part of the master plan to incorporate public art. It's been a part of the master plan since 2010. There's no new master plan from what I know. So to honor that, that's why I continue to show up for public art. And we have enough murals at this point. Time to move on to some other medium. Those are always room for more murals. Sorry, everyone. But
Was
yeah.
there consideration given to Railroad Square or Gilboa Avenue?
Well, we wanted to find the lowest hanging fruit, so we asked the Parks and Rec director where they thought would be the easiest to incorporate. If we should approach a different department, that would be fine. We would be happy to put it in a more public place. Parks and downtown are great. I know they're redesigning the entire Main Street, and that's gonna take 4 years, and yeah, we don't wanna
Well,
wait for that.
It will be 3 or 4 years before the project makes its way to.
Yeah.
Well, the
Railroad
hope
Square.
is that this is a cornerstone project.
Yes.
It'll breed additional submissions by other artists. Now, for example, the city of Nashua, I just found out recently, has a sculpture symposium. They've been doing it for 18 years. And they invite artists from all over the world to come in and create sculptures out of marble and granite and whatnot. And you can go over there and look at them, chipping away with their hammers and chisels. And they leave their works of art with the city. So there's something like 60-odd pieces of sculpture that are around the city of Nashua. And some of it is quite stunning.
General comment.
Yeah, okay, Randy and then Andy.
Okay, one, I happened to be listening to the radio about this particular, your comments on this particular piece of art. And I like it because I heard that basically it's where it's four-sided and 4 cutouts on 4 sides. You can look at a same piece of sculpture from 4 different angles and come up with 4 different opinions. And I liked that. I like the concept of this particular piece of art and what it stands for. Secondly, as far as Pat Russell Park goes, Mitch and I both had the opportunity of sitting with Pat Russell as city councilors and as she became mayor. And I asked myself, and Pat Russell was very opinionated. There was no black and white. He knew where she came from. And my thought is, would she approve of this at her park? And in my opinion on this piece of art is absolutely yes. She probably wouldn't say yes to everything. I could just picture her now. When Mitch and I would come into council meetings, she'd do one of these. Come here. I don't agree with that. And I think this is one of those, she'd go like this, and she goes, that's a good idea. And I do think it's a good idea. I think it's a good place to put it. And whereas the expenses are being covered, I think it's a win-win. So unless somebody convinces me otherwise, I'm all on board with this.
Okay. Let me get Andy and then Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. First of all, I love the proposal. I would love to see more sculpture art in more of our parks, especially Ashwillet River Park. And certainly we made space in Patricia Russell Park. So this is a good idea. One of the things that, a little bit of a concern that I have is just the length of stay of this particular piece. And just some of the things that I know potentially may happen in that particular location related to graffiti, and would the sponsor be, taking care of the graffiti on their insurance? How would that go? And just the other piece is we would need to know the width of the particular slats. One of the things that immediately popped into my head, just as somebody who spent a lot of time around playgrounds, is one of the things that people, we had to check is the width. So a child sticks a head in, and all of a sudden, this is a good idea, and if it's, what's the name of the piece?
Thought cage?
Thought cage.
cage.
How do I get my head out? So.
I don't think you can go inside it.
Yeah, well, that would just be one of the things that we'd want to make sure, is, we just wouldn't want to make sure we had the fire department on a phone call to, my head stuck in a thought cage.
Well, I think if you see our letter, the dimensions are 8 feet tall by 2 feet 6 inches. That's 2.5 feet on each side, so that's the width.
But is that the gaps in there?
No, that's the width of the.
Right. I'm talking about the gap and if you see the visual,
We could find that out.
yeah, that would be the piece that we would really need to know.
Okay.
And I guess you take that into consideration for like playgrounds.
Yes,
Those are specs that are important,
yes.
children's heads.
Yeah.
Laura, you're on.
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to ask, point of clarification, how much of this discussion is about this particular sculpture and how much of it is about establishing the platform that would be a rotating place for art? Because I do kind of feel like that's almost two separate questions. In terms of Pat Russell Park, I will say that my first gut feeling was that doesn't really make sense there. However, I did go back and read the plans and the history of that park, and sculptures were actually mentioned in some of those documents and preserving a place for that. So,
Thank you.
Jake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be honest that, like, even within the last 24 hours, if this meeting had been last night, I would have been viewing this sculpture totally differently. But I opened it up right now and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I kind of see this, I kind of get it. I like it a lot more than I did when I first saw it in my packet. Pat Russell Park, I guess, is not technically in my ward. It's right on the border, but I consider it the park in my ward. I think it's like just barely in Ward 2. And I'm always happy to see development and vibrancy coming to East Keene and that part of East Keene. Aesthetically, I was interesting to hear Andy mention Ashuelot River Park, because aesthetically I kind of saw this in my mind at Ashuelot River Park, maybe a little more than Pat Russell.
They're not accepting art anymore.
Okay. If the only outstanding question, because I actually do think that the proposal was pretty thorough in terms of addressing different points of the public art resolution and what our policy as a council is. If the only outstanding question is the width and the safety aspect, I think that I'm okay with moving this forward with the direction to kind of get that answered and go from there.
Yeah, I wanted to just answer or like speak to a question of like, is this the group that decides what's art? I think that Friends of Public Art doesn't even really stand in the way of deciding if they like this piece of art or not. It's not politically driven. It's not representing any like sexuality stuff. It's not like really suggestive of anything. It's a pretty nice thing to look at. I know in Nashua they've had problems with things that they've put up, and it's been very obvious that it looked like something that they didn't intend for it to look like, and then they want to take it down. And like, we're going to try and vet that before we get to this point. And so we've looked at this project and this sculpture and thought, you know, the one concern I had is it tippable? You know, is someone going to push this thing over? It's how many pounds? It's like a ton.
1,800 pounds is a
Yeah.
ton.
Yeah,
Good
so
luck.
I don't think it's gonna tip, but the graffiti is really important, what happens, so we'll make sure to cover that and decide in the insurance policy how that works. There is special spray that you can spray, to repel it, so that makes cleaning really easy, so we could just easily treat it with something. And then, yeah, I think overall, we're all just gonna take this project as it is, but possibly use it as a model for the next one. If this is a 12-month project, that would be great for us. I think the artist is willing to bring their truck and crane and drop it in and remove it for a certain fee. And if that's a smooth process for everybody, and we find funding again to support that, why couldn't we make it rotational, and do this every year? I'd probably like to see it a little bit longer, maybe 2 years. A year flies by, in my opinion. But also, if there's another location and spot, I know Meredith, New Hampshire has rotating art and sculpture yearly, and they take care of it. These things are much smaller. This is a very big piece of art, so it requires a lot more logistical backing, not just two people carrying it. So there's that, and I think we should be thinking long-term as far as the vision of what we want. Do we want people to come here for a variety of reasons? I think so. I think art is really important, and it's an asset to this community, as we've learned from the murals. And we need sculpture. It's definitely a missing aspect for the community.
Well, if one of the objectives of art is to create conversations, well, I guess we succeeded.
Right.
We could call it a peace poll.
Well,
Quite seriously,
and as far as the insurance goes, I mean, this is not the first public sculpture park or establishment that's ever happened. So there are other installations where insurance has been addressed, and I would see there's plenty of precedent for us to follow.
someone is going to have to convince me, and I'm not going to put our Public Works Director on the spot, that that is not tippable. Because, boy, it looks like no, Don, I'm not asking you. A real structural engineer or someone to convince me that that is going to sit on a base, because that absolutely looks very frightening to me.
Well, it's been sitting in an open field in Stowe, Vermont for
I'm
about...
not saying from wind, I'm talking about
People.
people.
Well, it's a public viewing area. If somebody wanted to push it over, they could.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. Still, same thing.
Would like installing there's a steel base around it, if we got okay from the artist and they installed it with footings of some sort, like metal stake, like
Whatever the
drive.
structural engineer says will make that safe, because that certainly is big enough to crush someone.
Can we talk to them from the city to get them to like, okay, what exactly that would need?
Yeah. Oh, okay, Don.
Yeah, that'll bring Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucy, Public Works Director. I was just going to suggest that if the committee so inclined, the motion should say, include some language about working out details for installation with staff. And we can certainly work with Georgia and the artist to make sure that it is safely secured to the ground and not tippable.
Okay, yes, Andy.
Great, that's awesome.
I would just also like to add that I am aware that Mr. McMillan did have a conversation with our director, Kara Fisk-Hennessy, and she did touch base with me on this whole discussion. I encourage her to just review the applicant, as Ms. Casamitis had shared. The application is complete, so we have reviewed it. It is complete. They've followed the guidelines of what they needed to do to bring this forward to you tonight. The thing, and I agree with our Public Works Director, related to, have some language in there just following up on those particular concerns, contingent upon the additional details related to the width of the gaps. But I do feel that the application has been completed as appropriately what they were supposed to do.
Thank you. Any other committee questions? Anyone from the public or city attorney? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note that there's a lot of logistical questions, and the resolution does have a lot of items that we, the staff, were hoping to address after this meeting with the petitioner. Myself, the resolution would contemplate probably a different type of insurance than we've done with different art installations in the past, given the location, probably an MOU. We do need to have more conversation about the maintenance, monitoring, removal, logistics of that before it can be approved under the resolution, and we haven't had those types of conversations yet. So I understand we are happy with what we've heard so far, but there's some more stuff we have to do.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about the wording of, could this committee make a motion and pass a motion of approving the request contingent on review to staff satisfaction of outstanding questions?
Are you asking so that the vote basically approves this from your perspective, and then it's up to the staff to finish it up with the resolution?
I just am sick of more time.
I understand. You can absolutely do that, but you need to be aware that the way that those items in the resolution are things the council's determined it's supposed to be monitoring and approving. If you want the staff to take those over and say it's at the discretion of city staff to make sure these are met, we can do that as well. But just want you to be aware that that's the process traditionally.
I hate more time also, but I think that there's a lot of questions that can be answered at the next meeting. But at least there's general agreement that it is worthwhile, and we do want to likely pursue it. So the background notes would show that. Good?
Right. I agree.
Move.
All right, I'll read my unedited version here. I would move to recommend placing the request to install a sculpture at Patricia Russell Park on more time to allow for staff to come back after review of the public art resolution with the artist and petitioners to determine if it is appropriate for this space.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? We are supportive, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Who should we respond to for answering some of these questions?
You can talk to me.
Okay.
There's legal questions, there's Parks and Rec questions, and then there's code enforcement, basically.
Just to clarify, we'll be coming back for another meeting to have a motion to push it back to council. So this
Yes.
was
Yes.
just an acceptance that they like the project, and we'll talk more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my question is, when will the Patricia Russell Park be completed? I think it's under seed now, but is there more work to be done?
The only thing left, all the lights got installed this week, and one of them didn't because there was a part missing, but I think they've got that fixed, so all the lights are now installed, and the bocce court is gonna get started next week, and that'll be complete. And Public Works is also working to have the sidewalk completed here in the very near future, next couple of weeks, for the skate park, and the fencing will go up in like 3 weeks, so we're imminent. We'll be completed before the end of June, that whole thing, so.
Are there
kudos to the-
trees that are going to be planted as well?
Yeah, there are some trees, and those will be installed within the month of June, over the course of the summer.
So by the end of June, it'll be pretty much
Yeah,
completed.
yep, yeah. But I know we have places related for the public art, so we can work with you on that front, and be part of that conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a communication regarding a request for a crosswalk at Tiffin Street. Public Works Director, or is that on you? Presenting, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucio, Public Works Director. So I don't believe that the requester is here this evening, but we did get this in time that the engineering division has reviewed it. So I would say that in terms of where it's applicable or appropriate to putting marked crosswalks, you've all heard me talk about the manual and uniform traffic control devices a number of times. Unlike things like stop signs or traffic signals that have very specific quantitative criteria for where those things are appropriate, marked crosswalks for uncontrolled approaches is the term that they use, basically mid-block crosswalks, don't have any specific criteria that we use to decide where they're required or not. It's really more of a subjective, judgmental analysis. In this case, the engineering division looked at it, and we agree that it does make sense to have a crosswalk at this location, given the parking lot on the north side of Tiffin Street and the employer on the south side of Tiffin Street. The other thing I would say is crosswalks and crosswalk signage are not something that's codified like a stop sign. A stop sign has to be listed in city code in order to be enforceable. Crosswalk is not the same. It doesn't have to be listed in the city code, which is why a lot of times changes to crosswalk signs, we do those, and you've delegated the authority to install those types of traffic control devices to either the PD or to the Public Works Department, depending on what the issue is. So a lot of times these sorts of things get resolved really without the city council being involved at all. That said, I do think it's appropriate that this request come to you, specifically because it's hard for me to say that this crosswalk serves a public purpose. It goes from a private parking lot on the north side to a private property employer on the south side. There's no sidewalks that connect to this that would serve the public. So it's really, that's the issue that gives me a little pause. I'd say I'm supportive of putting in a crosswalk at this location, but I do have that concern that we're essentially putting in a crosswalk for one private property owner.
Okay. Committee, questions?
Simple.
Yeah.
Well, just a quick question though. So this is this is a public road that we're
It
talking
is a
about?
public road.
Okay. So that makes me feel a little bit better.
And the public infrastructure that would be installed would all be within the public right away.
It's paint, right?
Sorry?
Paint.
So we would put in the painted crosswalk as well as pedestrian crossing signs,
Okay.
but just the yellow diagonal.
It's no cobblestones or,
We're thinking a raised crosswalk with, no.
yeah, no. Okay, ready for a motion?
Move to recommend the city manager be authorized to install a new crosswalk on Tiffin Street near Timken.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Anything from the public? Committee? Oh, what, you?
Oh,
Oh,
what?
I think, Jay Kahn, Mayor, I think you're moving towards acceptance of this. I just want to point out it's maybe a private business that happens to employ 250 people currently, wishing to employ 300. So it's not an ordinary private business, just to clarify that they do have 3 shifts, and I personally am sympathetic to their request.
you just convinced me.
Yeah, push us over.
Okay, anything further? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, now, moving on to our next issue. What? What did I miss? Oh, I turned the page too fast. With apologies, sir. Communication from Ian Matheson regarding Court Street pedestrian safety risks. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm looking for a sign on the crosswalk or some type of illumination or something thereof that lets people know that, hey, there's a crosswalk here and there's people that are going to be crossing. I know it's been brought up before about that section of Court Street and concerns that others have. it's kind of connected to that as well. It's the cars that park in the street. We have bigger cars, we have bigger trucks. I'm a smaller person. They can't exactly see me. I don't blame them. And then I'm stuck in the middle of the street. So it's kind of the gist of it. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Public Works Director?
Steal your seat, 'cause I already used the presentation. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucia, Public Works Director. So first of all, I'd like to thank the gentleman for bringing this to our attention. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but, you know, I've driven Court Street 10,000 times, and I was actually surprised that none of those crosswalks that you mentioned had pedestrian signs at this point. And it just had never kind of occurred to me as I was driving the corridor that that was the case. So we did look at the corridor. We also looked at Washington Street, both. What our practice has been for, specifically for mid-block crossings, is anytime we have a mid-block crossing, you know, we try to have some element of enhancement, whether it's additional signage, yield bars in the roadway, and, you know, high-volume roadway, like on Main Street, we'd do the flashing beacons, that sort of thing. So I went and looked at all of these different crosswalks to see what sort of, you know, visibility enhancements exist there today. So what you can see on this chart is for Vernon Street, Mechanic Street, Cross High, Ingalls, and, yeah, just those 5 locations, there are no pedestrian signs today. But all of them have the crosswalk markings as well as yield bars, except for Starling. Starling, of course, is the drive or the entrance road into the Tanglewood facility there. I also looked at streetlights. All of them except Vernon, Starling, and the Stone Arch Village entrance all had streetlights either directly above or in close proximity to the crosswalk. So in terms of lighting, they were in pretty good condition. But I do think that almost all of those sort of missing check marks makes a lot of sense to add. With the exception of the Dunkin' Donuts, Stone Arch Village entrance drive, Savings Bank of Walpole, if you prefer, that I don't believe it's going to be possible or reasonably possible to add a light at that location. But for the other areas there with the stars, you can see I'm recommending that we do some enhancements to the visibility of the crosswalks. Earlier this evening, I mentioned that you've delegated the authority to install signs to the Police Department and Public Works Director. And I mentioned that specifically because we've actually already installed these signs. So hopefully you don't object, but the pedestrian crossing signs have already been installed on Court Street. We have not yet marked the additional yield bar, and of course the street lights will take some coordination with Eversource. So if you feel otherwise, we'd like to hear that, of course. On Washington Street, similar situation. There's 6 crosswalks there that we found that didn't have those pedestrian signs. And I am recommending that we add those signs. It's already been done. Yield bars will be added at the Walnut Cottage intersection. For lighting, Citizens Way, we would like to add a street light to. Gilsum Street, I put a question mark there because, again, I don't think it's going to be possible to add a street light at that location, just given kind of the configuration of the 2 roads coming together. So those are the recommendations and what we've done to date, and hopefully you don't object.
Just a question, and I'm glad to see you've already jumped on this, and good. I have a couple of questions. One is, we had a problem years ago, well, we still do, you know, even downtown with the crosswalks. One of the things we came up with, we put some inexpensive pin lighting directed down at the crosswalks. I'd like to know, you don't have to answer it tonight if you don't have it, what's the cost of that? For my example, say up on Upper Washington Street near Citizens Way, or some of the crosswalks that are more heavily used, you know, what would the expense be to add a little pin lighting to go down onto that crosswalk? Because especially in the evening, if that little pin lighting goes on it, not only does the pedestrians see it, but the cars see the pedestrians in the crosswalk better. So my question is, what is the cost of that? Of course, I realize it has to be someplace nearby to install them. And the other question I have also, as far as costs go, is the flashing beacons. We put the one on West Street, and I know all of us were a little apprehensive about it. We went forward. That crosswalks worked amazing, and those beacons work amazing. That, you know, I've gone down there multiple times, and I'll tell you, it stands out. The people get across. There's no traffic jams. Nobody backs up like they thought. They just slow down and let the pedestrian get across. The reason I ask that is some of the heavier crosswalks, if we were to do those, you know, add those beacons, not saying we're going to. So I just like the cost on pin lightings and a cost on what it would cost to add those flashing beacons to any particular crosswalk. Nothing in particular, just if we were to look at that down the road, what the cost would be. But I appreciate what you're doing so far, so kudos.
To answer your question, the pin lights that we did downtown worked and were very cost effective, specifically because they're mounted on existing
Right.
street lights.
Right.
We basically just tapped into the electricity that was already there on that pole.
Okay.
To do that in other locations, I'd have to be a little bit more research
Okay.
and do some thinking, because it would really just depend, as you kind of pointed out already, is there a pole to attach it to, and how do we get to the power to that? There may be some solar options that would be cost effective and still robust enough for, you know, like a public infrastructure kind of a situation. But I'd have to think about that a little bit. Your other question in terms of the crossing beacons or the flashing beacons, West Street, we actually were able to save a little bit of money because we repurposed some of the components that we had from other installations. The beacons themselves were actually harvested from the Winchester Street project. That when they installed that, the contractor installed them facing both directions of the traffic, so you actually had them like facing the rear of the vehicle as you were driving away. It didn't make sense, so we took those out and reused them on West Street. So that one was a little bit cheaper, but generally they're about $15,000 per crosswalk for those systems.
Right.
And typically we do those as a solar-powered installation, so that's the cost of the solar-powered version. It avoids having to dig trenching, have a meter somewhere, that sort of thing.
Okay. I appreciate the harvesting part. Hopefully get somebody out and harvest a few more. That's great. Thanks.
Yes, Laura.
Thank you. Have we looked in general at the visibility? So once we put these once we take these steps, are vehicles going to be able to see when pedestrians are waiting to cross? And are pedestrians going to be able to see when cars are coming? And then I'm also curious about the painting of the lines and the patterns. I know that the way that a lot of patterns, and I think I was looking at this the other day, I think you said they were going to be repainted, but the crosswalks, because they're large lines going in the direction of traffic where the tires go, those lines get erased. So it's very, you end up having a lane of traffic with a crosswalk and no lines in the lane. The only lines are kind of on the edges and in the middle. So I'm curious about, I guess, just the painting and in general, if we're looking at the visibility and that altogether.
So in terms of visibility, not unrelated to other items on the agenda tonight, it's already a requirement in city code that there's no parking within 20 feet of a crosswalk. So you'll see at those crosswalk locations, the parking stalls are further away. That's specifically for that line of sight visibility. I think you put your finger on exactly the number one issue with visibility of the crosswalks, especially in low light conditions, is the condition of the pavement markings themselves. Right now, the condition of the pavement markings is pretty awful, to be quite honest with you. We are expecting our paint contractor, it's something we do every year, and of course, every spring, we repaint all of the pavement markings, and every winter, we erase them with the plow blades. Right now, they're in rough shape. We are expecting the contractor that's doing that work to start between the first and the second week of June with that work. It is highly weather-dependent work, so with the wet spring that we have had, I don't know that he's going to hold that exact schedule, so I'm hesitant to give you a date when that's all going to start, but that will be happening, in the next few weeks. But yeah, that is honestly the biggest issue I see with the visibility of the crosswalks is the paint just disappears over the winter.
Just to follow up, so you said that you can't park within 20 feet of a crosswalk. How far away, so when a vehicle is driving, and I don't necessarily expect all these answers to be right here, but this is what I'm thinking. In order for a vehicle to stop for a pedestrian, they need to be able to see the pedestrian waiting to cross, presumably, not just mid-cross. So how far, based on the speed, do they need to see that that pedestrian waiting to cross in order to stop their vehicle? And what other obstructions might exist? So for example, telephone poles, trees, vegetation, is the angle of the road may mean if there's a bend in the road, then 20 feet, that may not actually be the problem. It may not be the vehicles parked, it may be something else. So I'm just curious if we're looking at all of those pieces together.
The short answer is yes. In terms of the distance that's required, actually kind of a little hint of this is in the city code related to driveway visibility and location. In the city's codes, in the standards for driveways, it says you have to have a safe all-weather sight distance of 200 feet. Throughout the city, of course, the speed zone in almost every location is 30 miles an hour. The safe stopping distance, if you look at like the engineering design manuals, at 30 miles an hour is actually a little less than 200 feet. That 20 feet between the crosswalk and the first parked car doesn't mean that the driver doesn't see it until they get to 20 feet. It's basically geometry, right? You're creating triangles between the person standing on the side of the road and a line of sight that goes diagonally from that point on the side of the road to the driver's eye a few feet down the road. So that 20 feet, that's where that is kind of comes from, and that was, certainly predates me. How far you actually can see down the road depends on any number of variables. Horizontal and vertical geometry, vegetation on the sides of the roadways, parked cars, of course. So it's difficult to say in every location how much sight distance you have at every crosswalk. But the rule of thumb is you want to have that 200 feet of sight distance. And honestly, we're not going to have that everywhere. If we were, in Indiana with nice, straight, 90-degree angles at every intersection, that might be possible, but that's not where we are.
Any public questions? Who's up for a motion? Where are you? Back to Jake.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to install additional signage, pavement markings, and lighting to enhance the safety of crosswalks on Court Street between Vernon Street and Starling Street, and on Washington Street between Taylor Street and Citizens Way.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Anything further from the committee? Public, all in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Okay, then we have a repeat communication from Steve Bragdon and Cheryl Belair regarding 82 Court Street. Mr. Bragdon and Ms. Belair are not with us this evening, but I think we've heard this a couple of different times, and it would be a great idea if we actually move forward with something to give them an answer for this year. And I have a question for the city attorney. We have 3 potential options, and I just wanted to ask, would it be possible if we were to say, to direct the city manager to draft an ordinance to prohibit parking within some number of feet of driveway, if the driveway was servicing a commercial office by the request of the property owner? So in other words, we wouldn't just be eliminating all the parking spaces or changing all of them, that if 82 Court Street wants it and 55 doesn't care, we're just addressing 82. What do you think?
Thank you for the question. My advice has been so far, and I'm going to be consistent with that, that the city's responsibility and liability is going to be dependent on us being consistent. And for those decisions about what type of road decisions and safety decisions that we're making are based on pretty objective data. And that's not going to be contingent on who the property owner is at the time. So it should be based on the type of data that our Public Works Department and engineers will use to look at traffic, dimensions of the road, things like that, rather than the requests of particular property owners or who might care, who might not care, because it's not necessarily going to be safety-driven from a objective legal perspective.
So the answer is no. Okay, thank you. I thought I had it. Okay, thank you. Public Works Director.
Mr. Chair, I have with me tonight the graphics that were prepared last year when this topic was discussed in terms of parking impact between current policy and different setback options. But to tag on to what the city attorney just mentioned, I think something that was discussed in one of the previous meetings was having that based on zoning districts. And residential zones could be treated with one offset distance, and commercial, industrial zones could be a different treatment. I think that would probably meet the attorney's concerns, but having it, parcel by parcel, I think is the real concern.
Okay.
Yeah. So would you like me to go through the parking?
Yes.
Okay. So this first graphic here is showing current conditions, basically. What we've been using as a policy and was adopted, I want to say, it was like the fall of 2023 that we originally talked about this and came up with this policy of where we would mark individual parking stalls and how those would be marked. Basically, what the city code says today is that you can't park in front of or close proximity to a private driveway if it would interfere with the use of that driveway. We've interpreted that to mean 5 feet from the edge of the driveway. So with that 5-foot setback today between Central Square and School Street, we're able to mark out 70 individual parking stalls. If we were to increase that buffer between the driveway and the parking stalls to 10 feet, we lose 7 of those. We go down to 63. Bumping it up to 20 feet, we go all the way down to 55. So that's another 8. Yeah. We would lose an additional 8 stalls going down to 20 feet. And then finally, the original request from Mr. Bragdon was for a 30-foot parking buffer adjacent to his driveway. And if we did that, it would eliminate 25 of the 70 stalls, bringing it down to 70 within that area. And last time we looked at this, we also talked about Washington Street being a similar kind of a condition. And as you know, we had received a similar request related to Washington Street, which is what originally drove us to develop the policy. And those are the numbers for Washington Street. So existing policy, 73. At 10 feet, we dropped to 66. 20-foot buffer gives us 54 parking spaces. And then 30 feet, we would be down to 44. So very similar conditions there. The last thing I wanted to talk about tonight, barring any questions, the applicants had also discussed at their previous meetings that, and in their letter as well, that they thought speed was a real concern at this location, and particularly that southbound speed was exorbitantly fast because people are descending the hill, coming down grade. So we did do some additional data collection this spring. You can see there we collected from April 29th until May 7th with the display off. So not giving drivers that feedback, just collecting data. And those numbers are displayed in yellow. So what we saw was the southbound traffic, 85th percentile speed is what we're showing here, as I'm sure you've heard me talk about the 85th percentile being what a reasonable and prudent driver would be expected to do in that situation. 85th percentile speed for southbound traffic was 31.9. So that's coming down the hill. They're going 31.9 miles an hour. For northbound traffic, actually going up the hill was actually a little faster. It's 36.1. We turned the panels on and reran the count from May 8th till May 19th. So giving drivers that feedback and flashing the speed back at them, it actually did improve behavior a little bit. Southbound dropped about 1 mile per hour to 30.8, and northbound dropped about 1.5 miles per hour to 34.7. So a little bit of improvement, marginal. But I think the bottom line is that those types of speeds, 30 to 36 miles per hour, is not something that we would typically say is a major speed concern for a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Yes, some people are driving over the speed limit, and some people we did observe, and catch in the data, were driving extraordinarily fast, but it's a diminishingly small number. I did see, I think there was one driver at 3 a.m. doing 58 miles an hour. So that is actually quite impressive. But that is really an outlier. And, I think you've heard me say that there's not an engineering solution to human behavior. People who want to drive like jerks are going to do it, unfortunately. This data doesn't suggest that speed is an overarching problem at this location.
Could we sign that at 25 miles an hour? What's the legal?
So
Minimum.
state law allows you to drop the speed limit on local roads to 25 miles per hour. It should be supported by an engineering analysis that justifies why a lower speed limit is required at that location. Off the top of my head, I'd be hard-pressed to find one.
Okay.
You are highly discouraged from just reducing the speed limit as a method of trying to reduce the speeds. And you've seen me give presentations on this in other locations. The 85th percentile speed is used by engineers as, the planning guide, not because we think that makes sense or, that sounds nice. It's because exactly what I said earlier. It's what a reasonable and prudent driver is going to do for a specific road condition. Putting up a sign, and I can show you data from Eastern Ave where we did lower the speed limit from 30 to 35, from 30 to 25. The observed speeds of traffic on that road actually went up next time we measured them. A sign by itself without changes to the road condition are not going to change driver behavior if they feel perfectly comfortable driving at 31 or 32 miles an hour.
Okay. Yes, Jake.
I have just a couple comments, but before that I have a question. So in reviewing the minutes of the last MSFI meeting, there was some conversation from, I don't think it was actually from the petitioner, I think it was from a supporting member of the public who I think has a business or operates a business or manages the property across the street. something like that, around the accident history in this location. I don't see that included as part of the packet here, and I don't know if it's readily available for the committee, but that would influence my thinking about some specific conditions that might exist at this location that would make it okay for us to move forward with some of the ordinance changes that we've.
And Mr.
discussed.
Bragdon did mention in his letter that there's been a history of accidents there. He had mentioned in his original application or request that there'd been a couple of accidents, and this most recent letter mentioned another accident. It wasn't clear to me from what from his letter, whether those were accidents that were reported to the PD and actually, responded to. I did discuss that with the police department. Unfortunately, the records don't always provide as much information as we would like, in a way that we can query that easily to say, accidents at this specific driveway. What they'll say is that the nearest cross street, for example, was School Street, but that doesn't necessarily tell us where that is unless we were able to pull all of those individual accident reports that came up for that query, and then have somebody manually read through those accident reports to figure out which ones were applicable. We have not done that.
Can I just continue with the comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I think my comments fall into a couple different categories here. First of all, on the speed piece, I appreciate your comment that just because we're seeing the data at the 85th percentile, which means that most drivers are driving appropriately, does not mean that everyone is. And even if it's a few drivers, I do think that is sometimes all that it takes. So I'll say that. The second piece is that I know this had come up, and I don't know we had much discussion about it as a committee. There was some suggestion that a potential compromise here, and I don't know how the city attorney would feel about this. I don't know what this would look like in terms of updating city code related to signage and being able to have parking or PD or some combination thereof enforcing different pieces. But if this spot that is right next to the driveway that is in question here had a sign go up that says, compact cars only, because as I hear the petitioners, the challenge is trying to get out of the driveway or into the driveway and seeing around larger vehicles. I don't know if that's an option here that maybe meets somewhere in the middle, but that's something that I would like to at least hear some staff perspective on, because I do hear the city attorney's concerns about, well, if we do it here, we have to do it in other places. I don't know that I'm fully there in this particular case, but if there's a way to remove some of that liability and still address what I think is a real safety concern that the petitioners have, I'd be very open to that.
I can start if you want.
Yeah, that's more of like an engineering question in my mind, because I get what you're saying. That to me falls a little bit short of my concern of doing a larger kind of like custom work, and doing that maybe as a happy medium, but if that's a big engineering feat, that's kind of a different story,
So this question, I think, came up last time we talked about it. I want to say it was maybe Councilor Chadbourne that brought it up. I did a very quick review to try to find if there was any like laws or rules that we could do. I couldn't find anything where either for or against that we couldn't put up a sign that said compact cars only, or that we specifically could. I think if we did, I don't know if it would be enforceable. That would be my big question. I think we could put up a sign that said compact car parking only, and we would have really no way of writing a ticket to enforce that.
So you wouldn't want to see my truck there, huh? Yes, Your Honor.
Jay Kahn. Just for the record, there is a 25-mile-per-hour sign on Court Street, and I believe it is to the north side of School, that intersection, just for the record.
Okay, yeah.
So I think I went down and I talked to one of the building owners after our last meeting, and I looked at multiple times from both driveways. And I think, both driveways that are opposite each other, they have different visibility problems. And I don't know that, I mean, if we want to remove a space, then okay, but you actually still can't see vehicles coming. So I don't know exactly what the answer to that is, but right now, I mean, I guess I would be more inclined to focus on looking at the entire area and just the number of things that come up that are related to visibility, whether it's, we hear pedestrians running out into the road or vehicles not stopping, but all of it is often related to visibility. And if we can look at that, that would be, I think, what we need to do. Even from this driveway, there is a small incline, and I kept thinking of all the conversations we had about raised crosswalks. The driveway's lower. So the driveway's lower, there's a slight incline, and then there are vehicles in the way. But there are also trees. So I don't know. I would almost, I just think that we need to look at the visibility as a whole. Different, yeah.
We're hearing a whole lot of, we can't do an awful lot. So I would just like, I'll get to you.
Okay, no, we can't do an awful lot, and we're not gonna make it perfect, but I do think the 10-foot buffer zone is better than nothing, because we're not gonna get perfect. The petitioner, it's not gonna be perfect for them, it's not gonna be perfect for anybody, because nothing's ever perfect, but we only lose a handful of parking spaces, and for the most part, I don't think anybody'd even notice that anyhow, I really don't. And if they did, they'll pull down a side street and park on one of the side streets. But the 10-foot, it's not perfect, but it doubles the amount of space, to be seen. I mean, it goes from 5 to 10, it doubles it. So, I think it helps. And I think that's what the petitioner wanted. Help me here. And we are helping them here. It's not going to cure everything. I get that. But it is helping without hindering. It's not like eliminating 50% of the parking spaces. It's 7. And like I said, I'm willing to bet nobody'd even notice with the new paint going in, and it just gives the visibility of the driveways. That's the motion I'm going to make at some point. Whether I get a majority or not, so be it. But we did tell the petitioner we would do something, and we've been back 3 times to this. And I think it's reasonable. I really do. So I'm going to go with that. One question, though. I see in a lot of communities now that areas, especially where they have a speeding problem. And you come around the corner, and I've noticed this, especially if I'm from out of town, so it catches my eye. If the speed limit's 30 and you're going 31, it blinks red. You're doing 31, and it catches you. It does. Your foot comes off the gas no matter what. What does it cost on those? Just the small ones that catch your speed, and it blinks from green to red really quick.
To be honest, Counselor, the last time I looked at the price for those was several years ago, and I think the prices have come down quite a bit because they are being used a lot more.
Maybe you can
these
find
days.
your harvester to go out and harvest a couple of those.
That's called stealing.
It's a separate question.
Yeah.
It's not part of the motion that I'm
Yeah,
going to make.
I can look into it for next month.
That'd be great.
But my guess is they've probably come down quite a bit since last time I looked at the pricing.
I think
for
it's a very inexpensive way to slow a few cars down.
The technology that's in that device is really no different than the panels that we're
Right.
using. It's just newer and better versions of what we have
Good.
now.
I'd appreciate that, because I think it'd be a cost-effective way of troubled areas in town. If we get a deal on a case of them, I mean, and they could be, it could be a temporary thing too. You could put them in one place and we could, put them in another place. But I think in a high-traffic area like Court Street, I think it'd be a good idea. But that's a separate issue. Like I said, I've made my recommendation which should be option 2 for 10 feet of a driveway, but it's not a motion yet, because in fairness, I want to hear if anybody else has anything else to say.
I was going to say the same thing, but you just
Bingo, look at that, 2 minds think alike.
overran me, yeah. What?
I do have a quick question, because we've talked about, I have, in front of me the presentation about what it looks like on Washington Street and Court Street. Are there any other locations in the city that this would affect?
So when we looked at this policy and where it was applicable, we were looking for areas with dedicated on-street parking stalls, meaning not just where people are parking on the side of the road and making people, kind of drive around them, but, a clear parking lane. Mixed use or commercial areas, not residential neighborhoods, and higher volume, so where there was a lot of use of the parking. Really what that came down to was Court Street, Washington Street, Marlborough Street, and West Street, but West Street doesn't really have any room for parking. So Marlborough, Court, and Washington were really the three big ones. Last year, we started marking individual parking stalls on Court and Washington, but we refrained from doing it on Marlborough because of the impending construction that's going to, obliterate all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Motion. Move to recommend the city manager be directed to draft an ordinance to prohibit parking within 10 feet of a driveway.
Second. Chair seconds. Okay, further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm not sure if am I allowed to ask a question at this point when there's a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
You can, we can't.
Is the intention for that ordinance to be applicable throughout the city or just in certain zones?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say within certain zones because Washington Street, Court Street they're just different because of the proximity to Central Square and
So
what
like
happens there.
commercial or industrial zones or some, that was the sort of thing. Non-residential, let's say.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Questions? Anybody? Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? We have 3 and 1 opposed. Thank you. Okay, and communication from Adam Tepfer regarding audio and data cables as part of the downtown infrastructure project.
Oh, wow.
I'm feeling lonely out here tonight.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, the request that came in front of you was to include audio and data cables throughout the downtown project. I don't have any presentation materials on this. What I can tell you is we did discuss this with our consultant. I also discussed it with the IT folks, the Director Andrew Mueller. For the data side of things, our recommendation is to not include data cables at all. And specifically what Mr. Mueller explained to me is having a data cable between 2 points by itself is really kind of useless unless one of the ends of those cables is plugged into a network, with connection to the internet. There's absolutely no way over his dead body will he allow a public data port to be connected to the city's network for security reasons. So it would really have to be its own separate, completely, isolated network. Creating that a internet network for this separate standalone system and hosting that is, I think, probably an order of magnitude more complicated than the petitioner was looking for. So really, it would be incumbent on the event sponsors to then provide all of the networking equipment necessary to actually use those data cables. And what Andrew explained to me is really the wireless technology today is so ubiquitous and easy to use that's really the way to go. And I admit I'm not a computer networking person by any means, but that was his recommendation, is that we really shouldn't be putting in network data cables without having it plugged in somewhere, and it definitely shouldn't be plugged into the city's network.
Okay, yep.
Just a question, and I know wireless is more the way to go. But with that said, it brings up an interesting question of when we tear up downtown, I know we've done this and regretted it with other projects, that we didn't put enough conduits down there. Would it make sense to drop down a couple of extra conduits going up while the streets opened up for future use, where maybe And I don't know what will happen down the road, but we find some modern cable that we can pull up, and if we got the conduit there, we can drop it and pull. Would it make sense just to lay conduit while the street's open?
And that's been a ongoing discussion between city staff, trying to see, does it make sense to include empty duct banks, empty cables for future use? The concern I have, and really where I lack expertise and don't know how to move forward is, okay, putting in a piece of plastic pipe under the sidewalk is very simple, but where does that pipe go to? How frequently do we have to have access to it? How big does that access have to be? Do we need a concrete vault to hold future equipment, or is it just a 2x2 little handhold? And I haven't really been able to figure out the answers to those questions. What is its purpose? Where does it go to? Where does it connect? Those are the things I just don't have an understanding of.
Just to follow up on that, I just think it is something good to look into, because I know when we did Winchester Street in Marlboro, the question was back then, and the council voted no, and then we regretted it later. And that's just something that I think, the cost would be obviously inexpensive, obviously, once the cost is opening up the ground. And we don't want to do this again, even though we haven't done it yet.
Actually, I believe, Counselor, and you may know better than I because you were here, but I believe when we did the main Marlboro-Winchester roundabout, we actually did put the conduit in the ground.
There was some, I don't remember all of it. It was some that we didn't, but I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
look at it, and there was a little bit of regret after. But once again, it's not an argument. It's just, like I said, the cost is ripping up the ground. And I know none of us want to see that ever happen in our lifetimes ever again. And some of these two are going to be around longer than a couple of us, so they might live to regret it if we don't do it. So I just think it's something to look into, because the cost is inexpensive. Even if we don't know, we don't know what we don't know. But we know if there's a conduit down there, and down the road somebody says, hey, why the hell didn't you put a conduit down there? Because, we want to pull some kind of a cable through. And if we don't, and the conduit sits there unused forever, it's only the cost of the conduit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that my question, without having the petitioner here, because I do have some questions around what the funding might look like for this. Has city staff, anybody on city staff connected with the petitioner about this? Is any city staff in the room connected?
So I did reach out to Mr. Topfer via email, and we trying to hone in on what he was looking for, and that. So I've talked about the data cable portion of it. I think the piece that was probably more in mind was on the audio side. And the idea is, the purpose, I guess, would be to have the ability to broadcast throughout the event space when there was an event. And for that, the how to make that happen is a little bit, I can wrap my mind around it a little bit better than networking, to be quite honest. I was a little shocked when Stantec came back and gave me some estimates for what that would cost to do. Basically, what they explained is that to pre-wire an area for sound, they used Central Square and Railroad Square as areas, a zone to be wired for sound. They estimated between $10,000 and $25,000 to pre-wire it for sound. That wouldn't include speakers or the actual amplification equipment, all the DJ equipment, if you will, just to have the cabling and the data ports or the access ports to plug your speakers into and whatnot. To do the entirety of the downtown, they estimated between low and mid six figures.
Wow.
And it's basically they said there's so many variables that they can't give me a number, but they said it would be in that range. I was a little shocked.
Could you investigate Randy's idea of the pipes?
Yeah, absolutely.
The same thing for the audio. I think jumping a bit into the informational update on the downtown project, there's going to come a point when we're going to have to say, that was nice, but we can't, on all kinds of things to make it fit a budget. So not to waste time
Yep.
and money, yeah.
Do we know how many events will utilize this technology if it's in place?
So the answer is, to your question is no. There are, I believe it's 11 different community-funded events that occurred that I think would have the scale to do something like that. But I don't know, we haven't reached out to say, would you use them?
Okay, so I think we've run this around a bit.
Yep.
And it's sounding like we're going to likely, who's moving to?
Move to
accept-
recommend the communication be accepted as informational.
Yeah.
Second.
Anything? Anything? All in favor?
You get two.
Unanimous, good, done. And now a brief update on the downtown project.
Oh, okay, it's going to be very brief, very little to report this month. The one thing I did want to mention, though, the Safe Streets for All program that you remember we did accepted a plan and adopted that last winter. That grant funding opportunity has opened again for implementation grants. We are working on a implementation grant application now that'll be submitted in June. That grant application is going to propose a number of pedestrian safety improvements, specifically looking at crosswalks and intersections and pedestrian safety for those. It's going to include the application that we're going to be submitting, so that the minimum targeted grant that they are hoping to see is $2.5 million. So these are pretty big awards for the community selected. To put together a project that's that scale that they're looking for, we're going to be proposing crosswalk and intersection improvements at a number of different locations. There's no one project that would meet it. But we're going to include downtown crosswalk and intersection safety improvements as a subset of that award. So it won't cover all of the downtown project, obviously. But hopefully, if we were able to get that funding, it would cover a portion of the project for things like flashing beacons, raised crosswalks, better lighting, that sort of thing. So that's something that's happening. Other news, the samples of colored and textured concrete were recently completed. Those are down at Public Works now. Unfortunately, the barbecue for tomorrow has been called off due to lack of proper spring weather. So we're going to be doing that a week from tomorrow instead. So I hope you all get to come down and check it out and look at the different patterns and textures and colors that we're talking about. That said, I do want to kind of sort of plant a seed in your thought process. When we were creating those samples, it really came to our attention that for whatever reason, and I can't explain why, creating green concrete is unbelievably expensive. Like much, much more expensive than red or brown or gray. And I don't know why, but it was pretty pricey just to create the sample. We're trying to see if that is a particular manufacturer of colorant that is cost prohibitive, or if there are any other more cost feasible options. I bring this up now just because a month from now, I may be suggesting that the bike trails end up being like a charcoal gray concrete to distinguish them with green symbols instead of all being green. Just because the cost of the colorant was actually more than the concrete, if you can believe it. So to spend that much on dye, I'm having a real hard time with.
You realize that, to me, whether it's green or gray, it's all the same anyway.
Fair.
I would rather think about a different texture or a different pattern and just leave it natural concrete. But that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, not being in favor of the bike lanes anyhow, just throw that back out there. But with that said, wouldn't it make sense, wouldn't it be just cost more effective to just leave it as regular concrete and then every 10 feet or so, you go in with a white paint or a stencil and you take a picture of, make a picture of a bicycle like we do kind
Yeah,
of now. Wouldn't that just be much more cost effective?
We will have pavement markings on it regardless. I do still recommend that there be a different color to differentiate it from the pedestrian space. My fear is if it's identical to the sidewalk, it'll be identical to the sidewalk for the pedestrians as well. And we do want to differentiate it so pedestrians know, oh yeah, that's the bike path. Bicyclists know this is where I'm supposed to be.
Thank you. Just a couple different things. I'll start with a bike lane thing. I continue to be confused as we have the conversations around what the texture for the bike lanes should be, because I feel as though I remember a consensus coming out of one of the council workshops that dyed concrete was what we were going to do.
That's correct.
I don't think we did decide on a color though. So right. I went down there. And on a Ward 1 walkabout, and I looked, the green, I know that there are some members of council who have to see this to believe this, the green looked better in person than it has looked in the photos. I can confirm that, although if it's gonna be exorbitant, I'm fine with the charcoal. I think we can cross that when we get there. The second piece is, I've asked this at a couple meetings now, and again, I don't know that I need like the specific answer at this meeting, although we're getting to a timeline where I would like some more specific answers. The ombuds position for the summer and kind of the pre-construction phase, I'm still interested in learning a little bit more about what some of those duties are going to look like in terms of building the relationships with downtown businesses, downtown residents, and other affected entities in the city. I come back to this again, and I know I said this last meeting as well, but I really do think that one of the benefits to having delayed the project for a year was to allow for time for the ombuds to be onboarded, and have those relationships start being built so that we could really make sure we were addressing any of the pre-construction concerns and nothing, or at least as little as possible, is falling through the cracks. And so I don't know if there's an update on that tonight. It's okay if there's not, but certainly by next meeting, I'd like to have a little bit more of a fleshed out understanding of how this role is going to be supporting pre-construction.
I can give you a little update on that. I actually had hoped to have the gentleman that we've selected for that position here for your June meeting. Unfortunately, he had a pre-planned vacation that week, so he won't be here for the June meeting.
Okay.
But that position has been selected. The individual is going through the criminal background check and all of that stuff right now. So it isn't officially official, and I'm hesitant to make an announcement until it is. But that position has been selected. The intention is for them to start around June 1st, doing exactly the work that you're talking about, introducing themselves to the businesses downtown, attending these monthly update meetings and chiming in, where appropriate, basically getting to know the project and all of the players. I told them I don't expect that they're going to be working the 20 to 25 hours per week immediately. I don't think that level of effort is going to be needed for a little while until we get into the bid phase and really right before the construction starts. But yeah, we do intend to have them under contract and have them start working on the project in a more limited capacity, in the next month or so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We had the bike race, the sidewalk
I
bike
thought we
race.
agreed we would never speak of it again.
I thought it was very interesting. The mayor and I and Councilor Haas rode the sidewalk. My recommendation is like 5 miles an hour. There was some concern that at 5 miles an hour, I was a little wobbly, but that's fine, If you say 5, you're going to get 7, so, right? That's what you said, and we'll get a little sign thing to hang up.
Is that in the 85th percentile?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, and There was one instance when I was riding, and, just going, and I was just riding, and Don stepped out in front of me, and as will happen, it slammed on the brakes. No, I didn't hit him, but it was kind of neat, the whole thing. Cones were set up. Half a dozen Public Works guys managed to stand there and not laugh at us.
Oh, they laughed.
Yeah. They were snickering, but it's certainly better than shoveling bark mulch. So, yeah, it's interesting, and just the whole feel of how it's going to be riding a bike on the sidewalk. It's going to be a challenge. And as Rebecca is saying, all the rules have already been worked out and communicated, and just a matter of training the public to.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the most important part of that conversation last week was that, it reiterated for us that training the public how to use the bike lanes, how to cross bike lanes, all of those things that we talked about with the managers committee are going to be really crucial to the success of these things.
It worries me, just like we have the signs at the crosswalk, look left before crossing the street. Didn't your mother teach you that when you were 5? Oh, well, never mind. Yes.
Well, that actually brings up a question that has been in the back of my mind for some time. Again, I was very new to council at this point, so this had to have been close to a year ago, but we had a motion come out of this committee to direct the city manager to draft an ordinance around bike lanes, and I received a level of communication from constituents at that time. I don't think that we've seen that ordinance come back.
The mayor and I put together a committee which drafted policy recommendations around the bike lanes and use of the bike lanes. And then that was presented, was it PLD? Might have been PLD.
Yeah, so the way that I recall it, I'm happy to go back through email and confirm this with you. And I could be wrong. I'm always very open about that. Not always, but in this case, I'm very open. I could be wrong. But I thought that there was some conversation about bringing, we had reviewed those and then bringing an ordinance to PLD. And then there was a conversation about
Let me
is
check
PLD the right place
that.
for it. Just hearing the idea that, we've already put together some of these rules,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's how I recall.
Rebecca was more saying that other towns have worked out suggestions, rules of the road, and the training materials are out there. But the challenge is going to be, you have people with Walkman in their ears, a cell phone and a cup of coffee, and maybe a cigarette too, crossing the street, and wow, it will be a challenge. And
I believe the council was correct. I'm replaying, rewinding the brain here, and went back to the 1800s, now I'm working my way forward. I believe, because I remember having that conversation with you, city manager, at that meeting, and I said, good luck with that ordinance. I'll be interested to see when it comes back. I believe the council was correct on that.
I believe Councilor Filio at the subsequent meeting had held up, the council meeting had held up an image of 2 bikes and asked us to guess which one was the higher horsepowered electric.
Right.
Yes, that's correct, yes. I remember that. I'll go back and look to see if it was in fact an ordinance. For some reason, I was thinking it was just a policy, but it could be.
I think it's
It
correct.
could
I think
be.
it was the ordinance. Could be wrong.
And I was pedaling, I was not electric even. So, anyway, enough conversation.
Yeah.
We've run the evening.
Move to recommend that we accept the information about the downtown infrastructure project as information.
Second.
That's it.
Anything further? All in favor? Boom. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I thank the members of the public that were here.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and city staff that certainly is here, so. Have a good evening, all.
I said horsepower, I don't think they had horsepower.
Yeah, no, but I remember, I remember that.
Oh, that's easy. It's down to 5 miles.